YouTube comments from a video titled, How Material Scarcity is Reshaping the World Order with Craig Tindale TGS 207. Part 1.
At Shannon Williams 7249 wrote,
The problem is that so many experts rely on the government regulation must save us gambit. Never individual choice. And I get that. But guess what? Government is nothing but individuals waiting for other individuals to save both us and them as a whole. A lot of fascinating stuff here. But it's like a certain set of people just can't see how these are dead ends. Trump is in control. How is that whispering governments anywhere will ever save any of us?
Amentat wrote,
It's too bad. You lost me at the first mention of climate change. My money is on Dr. Valentina Zharkova to win the Nobel Prize in Science. The Arctic isn't melting. The growing season has shortened, not lengthened since the manufacture of this hysteria. I'm a cattle rancher and farmer. Independent thinkers, not woke politicos, will continue to tune out when we hear climate change.
At Simon Krisnick 3437 wrote,
While the discussion on Western deindustrialization and the return of matter is certainly a valid and necessary debate, viewing this strictly as a story of Western dependency is a bit like watching half-court tennis. In reality, China is just as dependent on the West, if not more so, than the West is on them. China's dominance in refining isn't an unbreakable chokehold, but rather a mutual vulnerability. Their economic model is currently tethered to an export addiction to sustain growth, absorb massive overcapacity, and manage a non-financial debt burden that is roughly 300 to 310% of their GDP. If China were to cut off the West, it would essentially be shooting itself in the foot by exacerbating domestic deflation and triggering a collapse of the very zombie firms and factories they currently prop up to maintain social stability. Furthermore, the idea that China could easily shut down the West ignores its primary strategic weakness, the Malacca dilemma. Because China relies on maritime routes for roughly 80% of its oil imports and the vast majority of its raw material feedstock, its entire industrial engine depends on sea lanes currently secured by the US Navy and its allies. While the West may face supply chain pinches on refined minerals, the West could far more easily disrupt the maritime lifelines for the fuels and food imports that keep China's society functioning. It's a high-stakes interdependence where both sides have significant skin in the game, but the West's control over global maritime choke points gives it a potent counter-leverage that is often missing from this conversation.
At Armando de Villa Kirkwood wrote,
The activists were not wrong about climate acceleration. They proposed carbon neutral by 2030. The powerful made this impossible. The activists lost. We all know the climate models are conservative because of institutional norms, and that this makes us fail to respond quickly enough.
At Manningartside 7467 wrote,
This is a really great interview. Would be nice if someone in Mark Carney's Prime Minister's office watched it. I'll send him the link and hopefully someone will watch it. He's walking a tightrope right now. Not sure how much any of this would sink in if he has the time.
A Friction Hitch wrote,
This conversation leaves me with a fundamental feeling of revulsion. While I will not dispute any of the data points, I feel I must dispute the framing and the language of this conversation. When we say consumer, what we are really talking about are people. This conversation uses Orwellian language and true facts to convince ourselves of the need of the people to sacrifice their standard of living in order that we may reinforce the powers of the state and the elite few who benefit from them. This is the game in every single nation on Earth. It doesn't matter if you're talking about communist China, the United States, Russia, Venezuela, Iran, or anywhere else. It is the consumer, the people, who must suffer for the imaginary lines that they drew on the globe. In the 1880s, we had a movement that almost all Americans have never heard about. You were not taught this for a reason. It has all but vanished from your history. We had a movement that crossed racial lines, ethnic lines, international borders, and no, I'm not talking about communism. I'm talking about anarchism and the Knights of Labor who shut down the railroads and the mines and the factories and ensured for us a decent standard of living. The one thing that the Soviet Union and the United States agreed that they must stop was anarchism, which is why you associate it with terrorism. Anarchism is simply the tearing down of the structures globally that are there to suppress and oppress the people of this world. This conversation has been poisoned by the Orwellian language that was written over a century of propaganda by the American government and the government of the Soviet Union. You refer to people as consumers. You abstract your fellow human being in order to convince yourself that the state must be protected and the institutions that enslave us must be protected for the betterment of all, and who must sacrifice? Us all. Without these institutions of control, I think we would value one another more. We wouldn't refer to each other as consumers, we might refer to each other as people, brothers and sisters, fathers and mothers. We abstract each other through data. We have a consumer price index, and we abstract the daily lives of individual human beings once more. Tell me, brother, sister, why should we continue to suffer and sacrifice more of ourselves in order to prop up the apparatus that controls our lives, keeps us hungry, keeps us sick, and keeps us poor? Why should we sacrifice? Maybe this society is the best that we can do? Maybe we should frantically hold on to it? Or maybe, just maybe we could build something better? Those early anarchists were a wicked smart crowd. They created a number of institutions you might be familiar with. Credit unions that keep the money in your community instead of shipping it off to a robber baron or state institution. Both consumer people, co-ops, and labor worker, co-ops. Producer-farmer, owned mercantile exchanges stores. We still have a shadow of these institutions that have their roots in the anarchist movement of 150 years ago that started just after the Civil War in the United States of America. The movement that you have never heard about. The movement that you cannot understand because of the Orwellian language that has been forced upon you by the United States and the Soviet Union. But do not despair, brothers and sisters. That movement is still alive, and it grows inside those institutions. It grows with your help. Credit unions, labor unions, housing co-ops, etc., so on and so forth, and they grow with your help. You can help them by joining them. You will never find safety from these state and oligarchic institutions. You will find safety with your neighbors, your friends, your brothers, your sisters, your companions, and your co-workers. Do not allow this kind of language to spoil your mind. When we say consumer, we mean you. We mean your children. Is that what you wish to sacrifice? Are you willing to sacrifice that for any regime, be it capitalist or communist? Why not sacrifice the regime? The regimes? All regimes. Walk away. Invest your time, your labor, your money in your community. Invest in your neighbor, your brother, your sister, your friend, and use these institutions to do it. If you do that, one day we will have critical mass. The people will stop having to sacrifice. The people will grow and prosper. No government on this earth was instituted for the people. That's not what states do. States exist to concentrate power through a definition of property that is backed by the full force and propaganda of the state. It isn't there for you, and it doesn't love you. It is stealing from you, and it is robbing the entire earth blind. This is what is causing the mass extinctions. This is what is causing the inequality. This is what is causing the inaction. We don't want to fight your wars. We don't want to build your yacht. We don't want to farm your food. We can do those things for ourselves. Walk away from their system. Begin small. Start by taking your money out of a bank and putting it in a credit union. Use their technology against them to organize yourselves. Most importantly, don't ever let them refer to you as a consumer. You are a human being, and you deserve the dignity of being called a person. A person with inalienable rights that no state has legitimate authority to control, coerce, or to damage. I love you all. I wish you the best in your experiences throughout your life. Postscript: if I have piqued your interest, then I encourage you to fully immerse yourself in the history of the 19th century in order that you might understand the 20th century. Understand how institutions like the Chicago Tribune turned you and your fellow man into an abstract consumer. Understand that there is a way to fight back, and that is the only way we have ever produced a middle class. Imagine if we restart that journey, but this time we don't get derailed by fascism, communism, and capitalism. Imagine if we understand the difference between free markets and capitalism. It was after all the anarchists who were crying in the streets for free markets in hopes that they might free themselves from the drudgery placed upon them by the capitalist class. Yet somehow you think that free market capitalism is one term. A nonsensical term that was convenient to both the capitalists and the communists. A term that keeps your mind enslaved. This is one example of many on how institutions like the Chicago Tribune poisoned your mind. They warped your language so that you cannot even see your oppressor while they insult you to your face and reduce you to a consumer or worse.
And Herbst-Fluten wrote,
This really is heart-wrenching. How can wisdom and economic realism combine with such geopolitic idiocy? Let me tell you that the Geopolitics podcasts I listen to have figured out long ago the priority of the material that is, so to speak, the heart of the matter here. That's why it is so true that we are in the West unable to defend ourselves. But what made us blind to the facts on the ground so that we are unable to defend ourselves, while we're constantly talking war and spending fantastic amounts on the military? It is our ideological colonialist mindset and in general our nihilism that destroys our communities, countries and nature. And as a German still shocked by the total militarist sellout of the Greens, I really have no stomach anymore for environmentally conscious people and probably left-leaning, who are now prioritizing defense. Are you serious? Who has a right to defend himself against whom? The West is on the attack everywhere. The Ukraine war was obviously provoked, because Western elite wanted to rape and plunder Russia once again, just like they do with the planet in general. And if you cannot believe it, in this case the Donald has made Western aggression plain to see for everyone. To say that the West has a right and an obligation to defend itself is in these days the same kind of indoctrinated confusion that we practice between self-defense and genocide. Who has a right to prioritize defense, if not the world against the West? And can't you see that even though Russia and Asia and probably soon Africa and South America too are economically expanding and causing a lot of environmental problems, it is and always will be the nihilistic colonialist attitude of the West who drives the destruction of the planet, just as it is driving our wars. The West is constantly projecting his own evil mind on others, especially when they get strong. It's a Schmittian move because, lacking integrity ourselves, we need to construct enemies in order to make ourselves believe that we are all good.
And Gary_NRA wrote,
Nate, much of the Western situation we're seeing and the tendency for capital to accumulate, as Craig mentioned, is covered in Marx's Capital. His critique of capital is honestly one of the most profound things I've ever read. It's a highly underrated and misunderstood piece of literature. The speculative economy isn't a bug, it's inherent to the system.
At Johannes Christian wrote,
Why do they think it is safe to source titanium from both China and Russia? I think it is because the Western higher-ups thought both of those countries are just another target to colonize, and they can extract anything out of them easily. They still think it is.
At Beverly 7475 wrote,
So I continue listening, and then he acknowledges the dire climate change situation we're in now and how it's accelerating, and how the models don't work very well in all instances. Let's build up the energy infrastructure. Let's mine some more metals. Let's worry about defense. Are you people out of your minds? Serious question. Have you lost all sense of reality? It's over. Do you understand? It's over. Brace for impact.
At Beverly 7475 wrote,
We have to do something about climate change in 10 to 15 years. What the F hell, Nate? Stop having these SLO, delimited intellect and UA people on your goddamn show. I haven't listened to the whole thing yet, and I am trying to make myself do it in hopes that you regain some credibility by calling out that kind of suicidal nonsense. We should have done something 50 years ago. 10 to 15 years. From now, we'll all be in grave conditions, having nothing to do with silver and copper.
At Juniper 274 wrote,
I work in regulatory for at least 5 to 10 years now, in a corporate risk assessment called CMRT and EMRT. Companies want disclosure of all products we sell them that contain mica cobalt, copper, lithium, tin, tantalum, tungsten, gold, nickel, and graphite. They want to know why we use it and if there are alternatives. A new assessment is for rare earth. I think there are 17 to 21 elements of concern. That has been an ask for at least 5 years. Hundreds of corporations have done this assessment, so I would say many have been preparing for constraints and mitigating that risk.
At Edward Smithy 3Q wrote,
Not sure I care as much as these guys whether China is dominant or the West, whatever that is. Change of baton sounds good to me, to be fair. It all sounds like fair trade would sort most of it out. West has software China minerals, why not just sell them to each other? Paranoia more likely to cause war than otherwise. A lot of assumptions in this talk that don't hold up for me.
At Graham Hart 2723 wrote,
It's not only titanium, silver, gold, and rare earth metals. 40 years Aho GlaxoSmithKline GSK were making antibiotics in the UK. Augmentin amoxicillin/clavulanic acid was made near where I was living. Now all the antibiotics previously made in the UK are made by the same companies, but in China. Several years ago, there was a shortage in a type of penicillin used in horses for about a year. The reason? There were only 5 factories in the world making this antibiotic, all based in China. There was a big fire in one of them, and it became impossible to find it. Scale this up for all antibiotics, and what do we find? Most medicines are manufactured in either China or India. So if ever there was a war between the West and China, we would not be able to source antibiotics for our soldiers and the population in general. We have been utterly stupid to outsource everything. And the corporations and big business just thought about the bottom line and got way richer.
Xme wrote,
I know nothing about silver use in missiles, but the 500 ounces per missile thing sounded weird. So I talked to ChatGPT about it. It sounds wrong. Old Cold War era ICBMs had silver in their battery chemistry, which is why they used a lot of silver. Modern missiles use a little bit due to their electronics, but nothing like the amount your guest was talking about. Still, thank you. Interesting conversation.
Carrie B22 wrote,
Why would a sensible person go for defense first? Climate breakdown is a security risk. It affects our ability to survive. Humanity can change its behavior in regard to war, but we have no control over what the planet will inflict on us, which is getting worse the longer we leave it. Better under the dictate of a foreign power than trying to survive on an unlivable planet. We should be seeking peace as a priority, and hopefully all will wake up to this.
Adrianria wrote,
Craig rightly points out that the human enterprise must contract. This means fewer people producing and consuming less stuff and generating less waste. Not having 7 children would be a good place to start.
Posantandrew wrote,
So the main first and only priority will be always the security? I mean the defense? I mean the war? You mean everything has to be for war? She talks about it. www.youtube.com.
At Robin Schaffler 444 wrote,
Thank you, Nate, for this interesting interview. While there is truth in the comments about peace through not creating enemies, we also need to listen to other points of view. If you pair this interview with your latest frankly about the straw, the siphon, and the sieve, with its discussion of real wealth in contrast to monetary wealth, it's a sober reminder that a greater power has the option to invade and take control of the stocks we take for granted. That goes for biophysical stocks, such as soil and minerals, and for abstract stocks, such as autonomy, civil rights, and livelihood.
And Vlad Bunia wrote,
I'm curious if Tindale expects a return on that investment in reforestation. And of course, what is his net worth? What is the maximum cap on wealth he accepts? I don't think there is a place for entrepreneurship and profit-making in reversing the apocalypse. That's just incredibly bad taste and a questionable moral compass.
And Vlad Bunia wrote,
It is disappointing that degrowth received such little attention in a video about scarcity. Kirpon et al. Published in November 2025. Assessing public support for degrowth. Survey-based experimental and predictive studies. They show that degrowth is very popular when explained. Degrowth also puts forward policies how the transition can be done. Please do a proper reading of degrowth and place it at the core of your assessments.
Chillerata wrote,
Another great discussion. Thanks Nate and Craig for the fascinating facts. However, I think Craig is wrong in one very important matter, that is to say he keeps talking about how we need to defend ourselves. With due respect, I think the truth is that those nations we persistently denigrate as being our enemies, now commonly referred to as the Global South, are in fact those nations which need to defend themselves against US. In the early 1900s, before WW1, there was a choice open to the Western imperial powers to have given up imperial ambition to own the world and to have instead channeled all the wealth and resources that were wasted in war into creating a shared power multipolar world. But WE chose instead to waste all that wealth, energy, and resources on genocidal world wars, followed by decades of regional wars that were prosecuted in order to control and own all the resources in the world. In early 1900s, WE could have chosen to transfer and share technological advances with all nations, rather than monopolizing them to extort rents and wage wars, and thereby we could have helped all nations rise together and become independent, mostly self-sufficient nations, which would have obviated so many of the irresolvable problems this world is now so deeply mired in. Had such sensible cooperative peace strategy been adopted, as it could so easily have been, then the world would not be in this current unfolding disaster and, in my opinion, now hurtling into another unavoidable horrific global war that will end the human experiment. As Walt Kelly's Pogo cartoon character so famously stated, we have met the enemy, and he is us.
At Nick Martin 6668 wrote,
Excellent conversation.
I had to go through the first half twice as the content was pretty deep, but the second half flowed and honestly freaked me out. The dystopian period is where society recreates itself, as Craig said, but only as long as the authorities permit it. Only as long as we have ethical leaders. How can we ensure that happens? It seems there are fewer and fewer people seeking those roles with any morals a la Bobby Kennedy, FDR, or MLK.
Jacebo Monkey Rex wrote,
This conversation, properly understood, should chill every one of our souls. This is an extraordinary situation that has come into focus, and the implications are truly extraordinary. And I have absolutely no faith in the current leadership class to navigate this complexity without severe crisis.
At Eugene Clark 5316 wrote,
The U.S. and Europe are now and have always been imperialist. The U.S. and Europe are not running up debt for defense, rather for offensive weapons and war to steal others' land and resources. We have been doing this since Columbus landed in Caribbean.
Pratiquement Durable wrote,
Thank you for inviting Craig Tindale. This topic is so important and almost always neglected. When financial capitalism moved the entire textile industry from Europe to Asia 35 years ago, we were saying to economists that we can no longer produce the clothes for our soldiers. They didn't care. Today, metal production and refining needs huge amounts of solvents. Iridium needs 24 production steps. Metal recycling needs the same amount of solvents. The most important solvents are byproducts of oil refineries, such as sulfur details in the Geographical Journal, Mark Maslin. Where will they all come from without oil? As I said in the interview, the only solution is that all products must have a much longer life cycle. You may invite the French engineer and geologist Auroche Taifon, a specialist about mining, energy, and refining, that can explain this point really well.
At Perry 3231 wrote,
Wars are barbaric and need to be finally stopped, and the clarity of our responsibilities as humane citizens of this whole world, peacefully sharing our civility through this quagmire of horrendous proportions in generational animosities and prejudices with colonialism and power grabbing through extreme ways of weaponry and waste of our lives and our planet with greediness and arrogance. Enough of the constant craziness of escalating wars and death in our world. Rape, pillage, and plundering of the environment is not sustainable, and is also a loss of our delicate harmony with the environment and all that exists, with blatantly destroying our health and well-being, with creative passion and dedication to live with innovations, and success as a species that can evolve and learn to be out of this headset that is not a sane and acceptable ongoing process of destroying our civility and our success as humane stewards of the environment. This whole conversation is pitiful and crazy.
At Bopva 3627 wrote,
We need to start expressing AI as algorithmic intelligence. Artificial may be apt as a synonym for fake. The technology being described is the use of advanced computer programs, notably incorporating machine learning, to analyze and put to other uses vast databases, all enabled by the latest chips. It's a continuation of automation and augmentation that I've seen over the past 50 years as STEM knowledge and skills accumulate. Artificial intelligence is part of the hype. The discourse will be more constructive if we can be more precise in the words we use. Merlin is simply advanced computer programming applied to vast databases of bird calls and related data. I recently made 2 queries through a search engine, which provided me first with an AI-generated response I didn't ask for, and that AI response had clear errors. Merriam-Webster, synonyms for artificial, unnatural, strained, mock, fake, false, mechanical, simulated, pseudo.
At Perry 3231 wrote,
Read the books and see the obvious importance of knowing about the different overall aspects of learning from people like Buckminster Fuller and their contributions to live with harmony and revitalization of our lives with thoughtful and intelligent opinions.
At Perry 3231 wrote,
Freely unencumbered by craziness and the negative and ignorance of this time of upheaval and chaos is not sustainable and is also ridiculously harmful to the environment and all that exists. The ability to have electricity from a spinning gyroscope surrounded by circular magnets has been available for decades. Bruce De Palma created the end machine for the development of free electricity and a non-polluting way to achieve power to supply us with quiet, sustainable, and healthy electric energy needs, eliminating wars, fossil fuels, and the pillaging of the environment. The plans are available for us all. YouTube has a post on the end machine. Check it out.
As Steve Leeper 88 wrote,
Tyndale keeps prioritizing defense over the environment. Unless we prioritize cooperation over competition and eliminate the need for defense, we are doomed. We cannot do what needs to be done if East and West treat each other as enemies. Our goal has to be universal health and well-being on a planet that we are doing our best to restore.
as Zianatori wrote,
Wars are ways for states to attack their own populations, militarizing them, and further impoverishing the land on which they stand. Saying defense is the most important thing, or whatever, is criminally naive.
as Zianatori wrote,
But offshore wind is really important as an industrial ship base for getting our failed shipping industry off the ground, which is more important because you'd rather be dealing with a war in the Indo-Pacific than bombers on our shores, I'd imagine.
At Lonely V8X wrote,
Not getting it. Tools and machines ought to be at their best. Good, better, best. If we have problems and under ND and D problems solving tools, then we solve the problems with the tools. If we don't have the tool, that's just a problem, and a tool is applied to get that solved first F erst phi RSD first and firsty, but it will be solved, and on and on. Or else.
At James Ruskinsky 8602 wrote,
Move on from political government human choice conquer world to God free will sovereignty nations at international citizen democracy, human choice for divine central authority unity of international order.
At Richard Hall 6509 wrote,
I know Nate's feeling his age at the moment, but this is another in the series. Catastrophizing old bores predict the end of the world. Starts by telling us we can't defend ourselves from whom or why they would want to start a fight isn't explained. Moves on to telling us that AI will do everything I'd like to see it provide nursing and social care. Just for example, and concludes by telling us the answer is to grow our own vegetables. Really could do better.
At Michael 5001 wrote,
How high can the prices for critical metals get before or starts to put downward pressure on demand? Look at the parabolic rise in the price of silver over the last year. It's a result of hoarding and speculation. The more silver that sits in strategic national reserves or in the vaults of metals speculators, the less physical silver there is for industrial buyers to purchase for use in some physical product manufacturing process. That's just going to keep driving up the price, which is good for the speculators, but bad for the companies that need silver to make useful products. Those companies only have a few options available to them. Pay the higher material costs and pass those costs on to their customers, if possible, or substitute for another, cheaper metal, if possible, or simply buy less and produce less. Two of those options result in the price of the final product going up. If the companies buy less silver and produce fewer products, but the demand for their products stays the same or goes up, the price for the product will go up. So, how long before these higher metals prices start increasing the price of solar panels and batteries. We're all used to prices for these products coming down significantly, because that's what happened over the last 20 years or so. But will that trend reverse just as the need for more solar panel and battery deployment increases dramatically? Will greed once again screw us over?
John Carter 1150 wrote,
I tried to listen to this a second time. This guy is serving Kool-Aid and sugar cookies. Glad to see so many pissed off comments. This guy is very knowledgeable, but is locked into supporting his own comfortable extractive rationalized delusion. The I got mine forget you mentality.
HHBRW wrote,
2650% out of work. AI will put 70% in the Western world out of work. And the robotics that follow pretty shortly after that, powered by that same AI, will practically put 100% of humans out of work in the where before the next decade, and likely 100% of humans globally within 20 years. A new economic model is needed to counter this. Because the economy will no longer be driven by wealth obtained from labor. It can be either utopian or dystopian, with the latter, given our current set of living arrangements, far more likely.
Nigel Gomez 8325 wrote,
Climate change, pandemics, and artificial intelligence have shown that globalization acting together is the best way forward for the survival of humanity and the planet. But it can't be driven by capitalist ideas and ideals.
Dave Barton 9301 wrote,
This guest might be well read, but unable to stand back and look countries based on their track record. How many wars have the US been involved in compared to China over the last 100 years? Who's the number one wind power/solar producer? China are embracing change through electric cars, education, etc. Opposed to drill baby drill, who shall we invade next? I'm afraid the US is currently the world's biggest threat to global stability. Many in Europe feel the US has lost its moral compass, blinded by greed.
PTS 619 wrote,
Great conversation, thanks Nate. But I must say that it will never cease to amaze me how people, ostensibly much smarter than I, and who are experts on subjects like overconsumption and scarcity, cannot see that having 7 children is inconsistent with their learnings.
Dirk Gerwin P1Y wrote,
At 58:15 of transcript, the guest says, do we defend ourselves or do we change the energy production of our planet? The sensible person would focus on defense first. Maybe it would be way more sensible for our long-term well-being to focus on changing our planet's energy production.
Bert Jones wrote,
At the end 1:36:00, he is describing negative ions aka anions. Definitely a well-studied, valid, scientific excuse to go for nature walks. I still firmly feel like, and I know I'm not offering a new perspective here, but we're likely jumping the gun on AI's worldwide takeover. Seems it's primarily our fear speaking, causing us to lose our sight on reality a bit. The volume of AI's ingredient requirements to run its networks increases every time I hear it, will only increase with more data centers capacity, and increasing numbers of peoples and communities globally will become fed up with all the intense concerns around it all and apply pressure to stymie its spread, thus evolution. Already there are so many of us rallying against it. Progression of AI is not only the ultimate dehumanizer, it doesn't align with the rules and limits of nature's science, cycles, and web of life. Future scenarios commonly mentioned, while I'm glad the warnings are making the rounds, strike me as biophysical pipe dreams. It would only expedite and intensify nature's corrections upon our perverse activity, a fact of contemporary times it seems, is finally becoming widely accepted. Surely a smart species will not continue for long such blatantly self-destructive behavior for some superfluous new tech. Well, regardless, AI takeover or not, it's difficult for a realist to have optimism about the future.
Dirk Gerwin P1Y wrote,
It seems that a lot of this conversation touched on military and armaments, and how far behind the West is in critical metals. The guest said several times, we need to be able to defend ourselves. Wouldn't the best solution be to maintain peace, to work for peace? China was last at war in 1979. For 1 month, they only have one foreign military base. They have a focus on defense, not offense. If you look at actions, the West does not have to worry about China. But China does have to worry about the West.
At the VixFix wrote,
The metals company TMC will provide copper, cobalt, nickel, and manganese to help supply the world with metals needed for the green transition. They are going to mine polymetallic nodules from the CCZ in the Pacific Ocean. It's less environmentally destructive than mining the rainforest.
Johns 7297 wrote,
Got to like this guy. Our closest cousin, the common chimpanzee, and we see the males of a community like gang members patrolling the boundaries of their territory and setting upon members of other communities.
At user YV6VX wrote,
The simple and scientific answer is that capitalism has outlived its progressive role in society. Until the workers of the world can unite and demand that production meet human needs rather than shareholder greed, and finally leave the barbarism of imperialism in the dustbin of history, humanity will make no additional forward progress. It is not possible to reform capitalism any further in the direction of progress.
Betty Sommer wrote,
Just checking in. I'm watching videos about Sepp Holzer's vision and work about life itself, about the paradise Earth we were given, about biological, cavasical reality. Sorry, but socially created realities, socially created inventions. Financial capital returns derivatives. Can't compete.
Queer League wrote,
The Economic Times must be a fan because their quote of the day is from Socrates. The secret of happiness is not in seeking more, but in the capacity to enjoy less.
Pascalxis wrote,
I think it's a bit nuts to say the country with the biggest defense spending in the world can't defend ourselves. This is exactly the problem. If the biggest defense spender in the world doesn't even think it's aggressive enough, then how do you expect every other country to feel? This sick thinking has to end. Enough is enough. We should redirect spending to areas that have benefit to citizens, areas like healthcare.
At Groucho Globe wrote,
I love the term trees store carbon from atmosphere. Does that mean we store oxygen? What about trees convert carbon to sugars, earth that becomes wood, etc.? When it is burnt, it goes back to carbon in the atmosphere.
At Dianedge 2406 wrote,
I wonder why none of these analysts seem to believe that when us plebs have nothing else to lose, the torches and pitchforks come out. Let them eat cake.
Arrobas les M5I6X wrote,
I'm 2727 in, but I think a contributor to Trump poo-pooing on renewable technologies and calling the green movement the biggest hoax is because the Americans want to prioritize AI. They don't want domestic industries competing with AI for the limited supply of bottleneck resources.
At Kimberly Homer V3J wrote,
When was this interview recorded?
Didn't China just ban the import of foreign chips? Why would they do that if they hadn't caught up sufficiently not to need them?
At Dennis Mitchell X5 I wrote,
Comment quality seems to be deteriorating. I'd love to blame it on AI engaging in the comments section, but it might be the beginning of a migration of humans away from digital realities.
Zaskim wrote,
Who cares what this demon thinks about geopolitics? Men like this are part of the reason why we're in this mess, and him and his ilk exist to launder Western geopolitical interests to the resilient/collapse crowd.